Hello and welcome to a new SEGA News Bits. I'm your handsome host, George. With me is my beautiful co-host, Barry.
Handsome George and beautiful Barry. Hello.
Hey, dude, I'm masculine, dude. You don't get it. Masculine.
Oh,
I have a sword and a shield.
Hey.
It's because we're talking about Shining in the Darkness, which turns 25 years old. And that's kind of, if you guys don't know what the game is, I don't kind of blame you, because this game was the start of the Shining franchise, which went on to make Shining Force, the SRPG that a lot of people kind of want back. And it was the birth of, I guess, one of the first games by Climax Entertainment and Sonic Software and Planning, which turned out to be Camelot Software later on. And then they were sold to Nintendo, and then they went and made Golden Sun and Mario Tennis games. What a weird change for the team. But
yeah,
the team has always been kind of legendary in a way that it's like, first, Shining in the Darkness is a whole like medieval take, Japanese medieval take, which was kind of popular at this era. I remember Dragon Quest obviously is the one that started it, and this is kind of like Sega's answer to that, and then later on Shining Force was their answer to Fire Emblem. Tell me about your history with the franchise, Barry.
You know, I'll be honest, it's one of those franchises that I feel like when it came out, you know, this game came out in 1991, it had a few things against it. For starters, at least from what I can gather, this game sold for $80 at the time of release in the United States, which that's very difficult to convince your parents to buy you an $80 game.
Oh, yeah.
On top of that, you know, it's like you mentioned, it was a very popular thing at the time, and it even kind of still is, to have these, you know, medieval themed dungeon crawlers. And so unless you're reading the right magazines, you're not going to really know the difference between this and just about every other game at the time. Sword of Vermilion was really the one big Sega Genesis RPG that I owned. And so it was almost one of those things where if I owned that, I wasn't really looking for more of them. It was kind of like, man, I've got my, you know, you have your Sonic game, you have your racing game, you have your fighting game, and then you have your RPG. And I guess, at least in my case, and I'm sure in cases of other people, once you have that filled, you know, in your collection, or not even collecting, but just the franchise, you're good. You know, that type of game, I should say.
Especially considering that, like, we were pretty young. I mean, we didn't really have a job. We didn't have money. I mean, I'm sure if I was like a teenager in this era, or 25 years ago, I would have bought it. I didn't actually know the game even existed. I even played Shining Force 2. I remember I got it. I had the game, and I remember playing that one, and I liked it. And I remember, I don't know, maybe like in like 98 or 99 when I think the Dreamcast was already out. Somebody told me there's another game prior to the whole Shining Force franchise, and I didn't even know, so I hunted it down, got a copy, and I played it. I was very disappointed that it wasn't an SRPG, because that's what I was looking forward to.
Right.
But it got good ratings for its time. I'm just not that into dungeon crawlers at that time, so I would have to try it again to get full aspect. I was gonna say the game did have a lot of the bad guys from the Shining Force game they used.
Right. And I will say that what really makes the Shining in the Darkness and the Shining Force games stand out is the artwork by Yoshitaka Tamaki. I believe I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah, it's and anime inspired, 80s anime inspired.
Yeah, and all the characters just look so imperfect, I guess I could say. They kind of have knobby knees, big noses. They don't look like your typical anime characters. You know, you look at stuff coming out of Zillion at the time, or, you know, just a little bit before that era, and it was all very your typical late 80s sort of anime style. So it definitely had that going for it. The only problem is that, you know, when they localized these things, they didn't use the original cover art. They'd have this sort of same old, you know, guy holding the sword. It might not even be the main character on the cover. Which again is, I think, another thing that worked against it, because for me as a kid, I probably would have latched onto this game had I seen the actual cover artwork.
Yeah, this is one of those games that had inferior artwork compared to the Japanese one, for sure.
Yeah.
But the franchise is turning, well, I already said that we're turning 25. This is the birth of the Shining Force franchise, which kind of spawned, I would say that the Shining Force 1 through 3 is the most popular, at least in the West, for Western gamers, the most popular entries to the franchise. In Japan, the new stuff is selling, it's selling merch. There's a lot of fans for it. But I think there's a lot of people that have nostalgia and want the franchise to go back to what it used to be. What do you think about that, Barry?
I really think this is one of those cases where there's a split between what the West wants and what Japan wants. In Japan, it seems like they're more than happy to have the new iteration of the franchise, where it seems very much like any other game, at least in terms of the artwork and the gameplay. And I think it would be smart of Sega to start you know how right now they're considering a lot of older franchises. It might be smart for them to consider this for a more Western oriented one, sort of like how Sonic games really sell really well in the West, but they're Japanese developed. I would love to see a Shining Force game developed in Japan, but targeted towards the Western crowd. Because, you know, I mean, Dragon Ball Z right now is seeing a big resurgence with the new series, and I feel like people who grew up with these games are now old enough where they would have the money to easily buy another.
Yeah, and you also got to think that Fire Emblem sold 2 million copies of the last game. This is a franchise that never really made it to the West and never had a fan base until like 2004 when they finally started bringing these games over. I feel like Sega kind of like pulled the plug on the SRPG stuff, and I think it was a wrong move. We're seeing like people getting more into the strategy games. Like XCOM is a huge game right now, and then they have Valkyria Chronicles is actually doing better than it did before.
Absolutely.
And then now Fire Emblem is doing really well. So
yeah, and Project X Zone as well.
So Sega should consider it. I've heard since forever. I've heard rumors that Sega actually tried to get Camelot Software planning to come back and do a game with them, but apparently they didn't like the way Sega handled Shining Force 3, which only Volume 1 came out in the West, and then Volume 2 and 3 never made it. Do I blame them? No. What are your thoughts on the whole scenario, scenario 1, 2, and 3 never coming West?
Man, it reminds me of Shenmue. No, at least with that, in that case, with Shining, you know, they actually made them, but that's definitely not a way to inspire brand, I guess, trust and loyalty if you're going to release one of 3 games. I mean, we kind of saw that with Valkyria Chronicles. The 3rd game never released over here. And so I feel like people were a little wary that Sega West even had any, you know, care of the franchise or even, you know, felt like it could actually sell over here. Yeah, that's pretty crappy.
The only other thing is like, because let's be honest, Camelot is not going to leave Nintendo. I'm pretty sure Nintendo treats them pretty well. I mean, I don't want them to be making Mario Tennis games, but at least they're doing something. Like most Japanese teams right now, they're kind of dying out, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm glad they're doing something. I would kind of hope they do another Golden Sun game or a new Shining Force game or another new IP. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad that they're around, and you think there's any team that could take the Shining Force name and do it well enough like the old games?
Well, I think, I don't know, maybe the team behind Valkyria Chronicles, but then again, we see where that franchise is kind of spinning off into. You know, I really can't say. To be honest, I'd actually love to see them start to localize a lot of the older games, because I feel as though, you know, you bring over the Game Gear titles or the Saturn titles, and they're old games, but they'd be new to us, sort of like how we had Monster World, what was that, 4?
I would love to see M2 do a 3D Classics on a couple of them, fix up some of the issues that fans had, add maybe a couple of scenarios that weren't in the game, you know, as extras. I think it would do pretty well in the online store, especially for $6.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of replayability, have some weird use of the touchscreen for battles as an extra. It could do pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let us know in the comments what's your favorite Shining Series game, and happy 25th anniversary to the franchise. That's it.
Yeah. If you'd like more Sega news, check us out at SEGAbits.com. And also don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on all our social networks.